Hi everyone. So today we are going to be breaking down the new parole in place. We have more information about when you can start applying, what documents you should be putting together to make that process as smooth as possible. So let's jump right in. I am Lilian Chukwurah. I'm a US-based immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system. The first thing I want to let you know is when the applications are going to start. So starting August 19th, USCIS is going to start accepting applications. That is the plan as of today, okay? As of today, the plan is that we're going to be able to apply for these starting August 19th, 2024. And the great thing about this is once that date reaches and you already have your documents together and all the information, you can go ahead and actually file the application. As of now, we don't have all the details yet on what form USCIS is going to want or anything like that, because we are still waiting for them to publish it on the register. So that's the really big deal here, is that we still don't know all the details yet, but we do know the date that we can start applying for it and the requirements and some of the documents you should start putting together. So that's what we're going to kind of break down today, is what you can do today to put you in a great position to actually take advantage of this program once it opens up for applications, okay? Like I always tell you all, if anything changes, if there's any news, I will be bringing it to you to make sure that you are getting all the details as soon as possible. So let's jump right in. We're going to go over the requirements, right? What are the basic requirements? And then we're going to talk about the documents, the evidence that you should be putting together now to prepare you for when that eventually opens on August 19th. So you want to make sure you have all your documents and everything ready to go so that once it opens up, you can go ahead and file. I will keep telling you about this program, keep giving you information about this program, because this is going to make life easier for so many people that want to apply for a green card through marriage, but the problem is they entered without authorization, they entered without a visa. This program is going to make it so much easier for them to apply for a green card in the US. So let's start with the first requirement. The first requirement is that you are present in the US without admission or parole. This is really key. What this means is if you entered the US with a visa or you were paroled into the US, and when I say admission here, entering the US with a visa is key. If you entered with a visa, you no longer qualify for this because you're not asking for admission into the US, right? You already had a legal entry into the US. If you had a legal entry, this does not apply for you and you cannot apply for it. All right, this is for people that do not have legal entry into the US. The second requirement is that you have continuous physical presence in the US for 10 years as of June 17th, 2024. This is a key date, okay? This is a very important date for you to keep in mind as you're going through this process, is that June 17th, 2024. That's when this was announced, and that was the cutoff date. So if your physical presence did not reach 10 years by that date, unfortunately, you will not qualify for this. But if you already had 10 years in the US before June 17, 2024, you would qualify for this parole. So we'll talk about how you can show your physical presence coming up, but I just want to let you know that that is one of the requirements, is at least 10 years of continuous presence in the US. And then the next one is that you have a legal valid marriage to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. This is really important. So if you got married after June 17, 2024, Unfortunately, you missed the cutoff. If you were married before that, then you are still good. If you got divorced before June 17, 2024, you missed the cutoff. Okay, so when they say legally valid marriage, it means that you were still married to that person as of June 17, 2024. Okay, you cannot file for this if, let's say, you were married to a US citizen for 10 years and then you two got divorced in January 2024. You no longer qualify. I want to make that clear because I've had people reach out to see if they would qualify for this. But once you get a divorce, you are no longer legally married. And another thing to keep in mind here is if you have anything that makes your marriage not legal. So if you, let's say, for example, you got married after a divorce, but that divorce is deemed to not be valid, then that marriage is not legal. Okay, so it's really important to keep that in mind as well. Is when is that marriage legal? Is when two people are free to marry, legally free to marry, meaning there's no divorce that's still open. There's no prior marriage that wasn't ended legally. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to make sure that the marriage, any prior marriages ended, and that you have all the documentation for that. We will be talking about that in a few. And then you want to make sure that if you do have a criminal history, you are meeting with an immigration lawyer as soon as possible to see if that is going to be a disqualifying criminal history. The important thing to note here is we don't have the federal register yet that tells us exactly what they mean by disqualifying criminal history. So once we have that, I will do a follow-up video just on this particular point, but typically they're looking at serious offenses or multiple offenses as well. So felonies, multiple misdemeanors, those are what typically would be a disqualifying criminal history for these type of programs. So really important that you, if you do have a criminal history, that you are getting a consultation to make sure that it does not disqualify you. And then the second part of this is that you do not constitute a threat to national security or public safety. So this is really important. They want to make sure that you are not a threat. How do they prove this? Right? They're going to do a background check on every single person. So you're going to have a biometrics appointment. You're going to have your fingerprints and picture taken, unless you already have that and they're willing to take the one they already have. But if there's anything in your background that could potentially make you a threat to national security or public safety, you would be disqualified. And then you have to also merit a favorable exercise of discretion. This parole is discretionary, meaning it's up to the officer whether to approve it or not. It's not like, oh, you meet 1, 2, 3, 4, and you automatically get approved. The officer still has to decide whether to exercise favorable discretion in your case. So if there's anything that you can include to show the officer how you have lived your life in the US, that is where you want to put that, to make sure that the officer sees a full picture of who you are and not just what's on paper. So those are the requirements, right? You must be present in the US without admission or parole, meaning you did not come in with a visa, you did not get paroled into the US. You must have continuous presence in the US for at least 10 years as of June 17, 2024. You have to have a legally valid marriage to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. You must not have any disqualifying criminal history or otherwise be a threat to national security or public safety. And then finally, you must merit a favorable exercise of discretion when the officer reviews your case. So those are the requirements. Now let's talk about the documents that you can use to meet these requirements, because that's really key here. You want to start getting these together. Some of them you may not already have, and some of these you may already have. So you want to make sure that you are putting these documents together and giving yourself the best possible outcome, because once this opens, a lot of people are going to apply, and you want your application to be complete. Okay, you want to have everything in there so that when the officer gets to your application, they can just go ahead and make a decision. They're not sending you a request for evidence and all of that, delaying the process. So you want to get these documentation as soon as you possibly can, and have it ready to go. So the first one is evidence of a legal valid marriage, right? So this is most likely a marriage certificate, okay? Marriage certificate. That's what you need to show that your marriage is legally valid. If either of you have been married before, you want to also include divorce certificate, death certificate, however that marriage ended, you want to include that to show the officer that you were legally free to marry when you married, because your marriage certificate only shows that you went through the process of getting married. But sometimes if there's a prior marriage that was not ended properly, USCIS will not see your current marriage as valid. So you want to give them all the documentation to show that that prior marriage ended legally and that your current marriage is legally valid. And you do that with your current marriage certificate and the divorce certificate or death certificate if your prior spouse passed away. The next thing you want to include is documentation to prove your identity, right? You want to give USCIS documents to show who you are. And as much as people want to think that you can't use expired documents, in this particular situation, USCIS is specifically saying you can use expired documentation to prove your identity. So what type of documents can you use? You can use your driver's license, whether it's a state issued license, or if you have a driver's license from your country of origin, you can use that as well. Your birth certificate, if it has a photo, right? So your birth certificate and a photo ID, right? Those two together will be good. A birth certificate on its own will not be enough. Okay, I want to make that very clear. If you only have a birth certificate, that will not be enough. But a birth certificate with a photo ID, even if that photo ID is expired, will be enough. A valid passport. You can also use an expired passport. A government issued ID that has your name, date of birth, and photo. Okay, so some countries have a national ID, and if you have that, that will meet this requirement because that will have your name, your date of birth, and your picture on it. So they really want to see your name, date of birth, and your picture. Okay, so whatever you're sending in, you want to have that picture there too. That's why a birth certificate on its own will not be enough to meet that requirement. Okay, a birth certificate on its own will not be enough to meet that requirement. So you want to make sure that you are including a photo ID, even if that photo ID is expired. The next thing you want to do is show evidence of your spouse's US citizenship. So the way to show that your spouse is a US citizen, you can do that with their passport, their birth certificate if they were born in the US, or their certificate of naturalization if they are a naturalized US citizen. Whether they're a naturalized US citizen or were born in the US, you can use their US passport to meet this requirement. The passport must be still valid. You cannot use an expired passport. Okay, when it comes to proving your spouse's US citizenship, it must be a valid passport. It cannot be an expired US passport. If their passport has expired, then their birth certificate, if they were born in the US, or their certificate of naturalization or certificate of citizenship would meet that requirement. So finally, you want documentation to establish your continued presence in the US for at least 10 years. So your child being born in the US shows that you were physically present in the US when he was born. right? You still need other documentation to show that you were here with him for that 17 years, or at least 10 years of his 17 years. But his school records, his medical records, that shows that you took him to a medical appointment, or you are the parent that they reach out to when there's something that's needed for school or for medical reasons, that also meets this requirement. Okay, so yes, you can use the birth certificate, but just know that only shows for that year that the child was born. Okay, but you need other records to show that you were in their life, and that record can be your child's school records, can be your child's medical records, right? It doesn't have to be your own school records or medical records. If you do not have that, it can be your child's, that shows that they live with you and you are the parent that they are reaching out to for everything. Other things that you can use to show the physical presence is if you have any utility bills in your name, rent receipts, school records, can be your own school records, children's school records, and that is letters, report cards, things like that. Hospital and medical records are another great one, because again, for you to have medical records in the US, you had to have been physically present in the US. If you have been to an emergency room, they will have records of that. If you have been to a dentist, they will have records of that. So you can use all of those things to show your physical presence. You can also get an attestation. So basically a statement from a religious entity, unions, or other organizations identifying you by name. So if, let's say, for example, you have been a member of the YWCA, right? You have always been a member of the YWCA. They are able to write an attestation saying that you have been a member for this amount of time and have your name. The key thing is your name must be on there, okay? It can't just be, this is to attest that this, attest the bearer of this letter has had presence in the US, right? It can't just be that. It has to say this is to attest that Jane Doe has been attending the YWCA since, 1996, right? So that's more of what they're looking for there. So when it says attestation, it's just a letter ahead signed by the appropriate person, either in the religious entity, in the church, the synagogue, whatever it is, the unions, the other organizations, attesting to that person's residence by name. Okay, they have to include your name. It can't just say the bearer of this letter. That's really important. You can also use official records from your religious organization. So let's say your church, every single year, you are giving money to the church, and they send you a letter at the end of the year telling you how much you donated for that year. You can use that to show your physical presence in the US. If there is, a sign up, or there's a religious thing that's going on and you sign up for it, and it shows in the church records, right, in the religious organization's records, that you were that you attended or you participated in that religious ceremony, you can use that as well. You can use money other receipts for money you sent outside of the US or sent within the US. Okay, so if you're sending money to your family outside of the US, you can use those receipts to show your physical presence in the US. So if you're using like RIA, Money, MoneyGram, I know they typically have an online account that you can set up where you can actually see your receipts. So print those out, okay? And go as far back as you possibly can. If you have children that are born in the US, you use their birth certificates to show that you were physically in the US at that time to have given birth. Your medical records will also show those things, but you want to include as many documentation as you can possibly include. You want, if you have a bank account that you used for 10 years, you can print the statements, and it needs to be dated, okay? The bank statements have to have dates on them. So that's really important. And they're looking for the transactions, not just that you opened an account, but they're more looking at the transactions. So if you're using your debit card to buy things, you're writing checks out of the account, they're looking at those transactions. So that's why I say the statements, not just a verification that you had an account. You want those bank statements. If you have bought a car, if you have a title, license, registration, you can use that as well. If you have a lease, a deed, you can use those. And your lease payments, right? If you happen to live in a place where they are giving you a receipt every time that you pay your rent, or they may have an online portal where you can see those receipts, print those out. Your mortgage payments, also, if there's a place where you can log in and see all of those, print those out. Insurance policies that has like a beginning and end date. And if let's say you had a car insurance for 10 years with the same insurance company, they will have, it's typically for a year or 6 months. So you'll just want all the policies for that time frame. And then tax returns, W-2s. You really want to include as many documentation as you possibly can. Okay, that's what you want to do here. Include as many things as you possibly can to show your physical presence in the US. And you can include things from different categories. So let's say you have your bank statements, and you're paying your rent out of that bank statement. You can also include your rent receipts. If you're paying your utilities out of that bank account, you can also include your utility bills just to tie everything together. So really important that you have that. If you want to schedule a consultation with me to see if you qualify to get more information on this, or to see if you want to work with me to get this done for you, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com. And when you get there, click on contact us and you'll be able to schedule a date and time that works best for you for us to chat. You can also call my office at 508-443-1788.